Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Adventure Card Game live stream. I am Sarah, I am the community manager. Today is October 22nd. Already, it is a dreary rainy day here in Wisconsin. Hope at least you're experiencing better weather. Today is a couple things are happening. One, there is the Steam Digital Tabletop Fest going on right now. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a scheduling change for us, so same time as right now, there is the panel that Greg is on for adventure game digital format. So I know you may be kind of shuffling around your time a little bit, and that's totally understandable. Sorry, there's conflicts. There were just some changes that couldn't be undone. So glad you're here. Glad to see you. Today is going to be a slightly different format. I have a co-streamer with me, and we are going to be talking about some tips and tricks on deck building today. And it's honestly more geared towards some of the maybe returning players, some of the new players, because we're going to eventually be getting adventure mode here, which is, again, kind of more geared towards the newer players. A little more like drafting and that kind of thing that goes along with that. So we figured deck building kind of might nicely round out the experience for you, because it can be probably one of the more daunting things about the game. So without further ado, let me introduce my partner over there, Widowmaker, also known as Ian. Welcome to the stream.
Hey guys, how you going?
Octavian Hythe from YouTube, welcome. So, Widowmaker here is probably the person I always usually go to for my questions, speaks very intelligently about it, so he has graciously offered his time to come kind of talk about the ins and outs of deck building in this game, because it's pretty nuanced. So I'll let you kind of take it away if you'd like.
No worries, that sounds good. Yeah, so I think one of the things about this game, once you get past the tutorial or the adventure mode when it comes out, the very first thing you're going to be kind of challenged with is what deck are you going to bring? Like, what are you going to do? And it's a pretty daunting thing. I watch uh, I read the Discord, I participate in that a fair bit, and I find it really encouraging because what I see is a whole bunch of people, um, going through that journey, like that first kind of, the epiphanies of these cards doing this and that and the other thing, and it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I kind of remember it, right? Because some of these cards have been around for a long time, and it's like been a couple of years, and you look at that and you'd be like, oh, I remember when I just first realized how amazing Starbridge was. Like
Oh,
all those sorts of things where you're just like, oh, that's just great. I need to make sure I put that in my deck. And yeah, what I'm hoping to go through today, that'll be useful for you guys if you're just starting out, or might just be a refresher if you're an old hat. Is probably just go through, like, the what you need to consider when you make a deck. What today's not going to be is I didn't want to just roll in here with, here are six decks that are really good, and if you have these six decks, you know you'll probably be able to beat every quest in the game on adventure, or expert, or whatever it's called now. Um, because I'm in the genuine belief that the journey's the greater part. Like it's going through that process, that iterative process of building your own deck, and working out what works, working out what doesn't, just playing stuff that interests you. I think that's where this game is at. It's where that you can really sink a lot of time and energy and get a lot of value out of your gaming experience. So um, if you're watching this, whether it be, if you're live, or you're watching this down the track, and you know I really hope that you can watch this and kind of get a bit of a leg up on your deck building kind of experience, because it can be really daunting and really scary. So Yeah, without further ado, I guess we'll get motoring along with my death by PowerPoint. Um, on that though, guys, if you're here, feel free to ask any questions, or if there's anything that you disagree with, just jump in. I don't want to sit here and talk for half an hour, 45 minutes or whatever, because that's not so great. So just jump in. If there's things there that you don't understand, or you think that I'm wrong, I'm not the authoritative figure in this. This is just like one way of kind of looking at this. So
Make it as interactive
let's
as we can. So yeah, if you have any comments or questions or any of that, feel free. Aaron, hi from Twitch, and Aaron had mentioned that there was a post in the Steam forums with PC Master Race people leaving the game due to UI changes. Yeah, you can't change it. I mean, you can't, as Greg said in his last stream, can't please everybody. So I'm hoping that people stick around a little longer because it's the first iteration. They are listening. The devs are paying attention to feedback. Also, I just want to point out to people too that this game does span consoles too. So trying to make a game that's PC friendly and Switch friendly and PS4 friendly, there's going to be some concessions that need to be made. So just kind of keep that in mind. But hi, Aaron. So with that, let's first slide it. Okay. So
cool.
Right now we got the too long don't read version.
Oh yeah, sorry, you'll have to forgive me because I'm watching the stream, so I'm like a little bit delayed. So if there's a little bit of an awkward silence, it's because I'm not really I'm watching it with you guys.
I'm a professional at awkward silences, so
yeah, so just the odd cough.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the big thing with this, look, I wanted to do a bit of an overview about, what we were going to talk about today. Just because, if this isn't your particular cup of tea, that's okay. But this is what we're going to talk about. And I think that these are kind of like the four big things. I think if you're walking into this game, there and you're starting to build decks, this is probably what you need to take into consideration. And they're things that I see people make the same mistakes over and over again. I saw Sarah make these mistakes when she first started playing this game.
What?
And so from the like the idea of building a deck based on the difficulty. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but the difficulty really does change the way that your game plays, and that's it's one of those kind of those mistakes that people make is that they sure, if you build a deck that can win in challenge or expert, it can probably win a narrative as well, but the reverse isn't always true. With that leads into things like your cost curve. So if you've played any kind of digital or physical card games and things like that, like having the right kind of distribution of cards and resources and things like that is really important. One thing that I thought was interesting, so I by way of background, I guess, I played the tabletop game many years, like before this came about. And even though like the adventure card game is not a faithful adaptation of the living card game that FFG made, and it's not supposed to be, one thing that did come across as a very kind of a faithful adaptation, if you will, was the roles of the spheres, or the colors. And I can totally imagine, like, if you're picking up this game for the first time and you just kind of go, oh, I've got some red cards, I've got some green cards, I've got some blue cards, and actually matters. Like there are certain things about those cards that you should probably know about when you're getting into deck building. And finally, and this one stands by itself. It doesn't really require much kind of. There isn't like a big spiel about this later on, but there's so many helpful people over in Discord. If you're not over there yet, come over and join us. Um, there's uh, there's a site called RingsDB, which is actually, I only just discovered this, but it's linked down the bottom on the Twitch page here. So, but yeah, you can go there. It's got a place where you can go and read, look up decks and things like that. So if you're really stuck, you can go there. And I think I've seen Sarah yoink a few out of RingsDB
No.
for streams and things like that. So
I have definitely taken from RingsDB. I have actually contributed a couple more of the hero award type stuff, but it's a really great resource for some fun decks, some interesting decks, some good decks. I mean, play around. That's kind of what I do. So, by the way, hi Lazgu on YouTube. Hello, Tour the Blessed. Welcome. There's a little bit of discussion about the UI, and I'm with you, Tour the Blessed. I'm with you. Anyway, okay, so next page for you.
cool. So I think that this is a really big thing, and I think this is one of the first things that I remember about Sarah's very first stream. So if you hadn't watched Sarah's first stream,
It's
it
so
was
bad.
hilarious. It was hilarious.
It's so
So I think
bad.
I think she I don't know. I think Sarah had played about 3 hours, maybe tops, of this game that she'd just become a community manager of before coming onto stream and playing it publicly.
That's
And of
true.
course, we were all so excited. Like there was this game that we'd all love, and obviously, it had been put on hiatus for about 12 months, and even before that, there'd been, sort of 12 months prior to that without a community manager, and we hadn't had a lot of interaction and stuff. So there'd been content coming out, but we hadn't really spoken to many people. But anyway, long story short, Sarah comes along and, she pulls this deck out and plays on narrative, or standard as it's called now. I'm going to use those interchangeably because if you're watching this later on, we literally just changed the difficulty naming. So that's part of the update. So standard narrative and all that sort of stuff has all been adjusted. So
And a big part of that is to
um,
avoid confusion with adventure mode versus adventure difficulty, so they changed it to the standard, advanced, and expert. And then, in case
that
anybody's
makes
wondering.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But I remember Sarah's rolled in with this narrative deck, and she just rolls this quest. I think she was doing Atacap, which is like the first quest of the first campaign, and she just made a mess of it. Poor old Sauron didn't know what hit him, and then of course us armchair critics were screaming from the bushes, telling you to turn it up to the next difficulty level. And I remember sitting there watching it and going, "Your deck's not going to work in adventure mode." It was at the time. I'm like, it won't work. And the reason for that is, and it's a really big jump, I think, in between standard and advanced. So Sauron just gets more resources, right? So he gets 3, 4, or 5 resources depending on what difficulty you're in. Um, Sarah, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong here. I swear, and this may have been changed, but I'm sure that there are cards that Sauron gets in expert that he doesn't get in the lower difficulties.
I would agree with
I
that.
don't. I'm sure there's this guy who's like a 4/5 surge block, and I'm like, I've never seen him outside of challenging. And every time he comes down, he comes in and he kills something. I'm just like, oh man, I wanted that. Um, but
I
I
have
mean,
I
back
have
to
no evidence to back any of that up, but I think that is accurate. There are some cards that pop up on different difficulties that don't on others. So
yeah, and so I think the big thing is if you start playing on narrative, which is a perfectly fine place to start, I would strongly recommend you start there if you're just starting off. Just be mindful of the fact that you get 2 cards every turn in narrative. Um, you don't get 2 cards on any other difficulty. So if you're running a deck and it's playing a narrative and you decide you want to go play in a different difficulty level, you're probably going to have to change your deck a little bit. yeah, I actually when I make my decks, I label them the difficulty I made them on. I made them for, I should say, and a lot of that comes down to, if I'm just playing a fun deck of random things that I just wanted to play around with. Um, I play it on narrative, and I flag it and say, well, I don't have a lot of card drawing here because I'm drawing 2 cards every turn. Um, and it's a good way to get hero awards for some of those really tricky ones. Like, Elrond's a tricky um, hero award to get. Aragorn is a tricky one to get. Play them on narrative. It's okay. Like, no one's gonna no one's gonna criticize you for playing on whatever difficulty you're comfortable with. Um, so yeah, look, that's that. It's just something to keep in mind. And the other thing that I found, and feel free if you're in the chat, share your own experiences with this. But I certainly found that playing on the harder difficulties, I had to take more allies, whereas in, say, standard or advanced, I'd be in a situation where you'd end up with allies in your hand that you couldn't play because your allies weren't getting removed. They weren't getting killed by Sauron's minions. So you're sitting here you're drawing these allies that you couldn't play. Whereas on harder difficulties, you're blocking more, they're taking more hits, they're dealing more damage that you're not able to heal up. So you're expecting to lose some. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. When you're building your decks, build it for difficulty. So yeah, you got anything does that sound like a reasonable statement, Sarah? Like, have you
I I
something you've learned?
absolutely would agree with that. I think it's a fine balancing act in terms of difficulty versus allies. I think that's a really good sticking point that I actually never made the connection to before. But yeah, in some of the decks that I had built, I was playing on standard, also known as narrative mode, and I was like, man, I got a handful of people I can't even play because I got a full battle line. So that's kind of an indication that you got too many allies. Maybe you should substitute other things for it. So um, that's a yeah. So as you get ramp up in the difficulty, things are going to die a little more frequently. Yeah, like I said, I never made that connection. It's just yeah. Okay, so oops, I am getting ahead of us. Pay attention to your curve.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I kind of touched on, during the TLDR bit, but it's a very common thing in, card games in general, or just resource management, essentially. Like, it's a resource management component of this game. In a lot of ways, this game, it's a lot simpler because you just get the same number of resources every turn, whereas, you know, other games you might have, it might be a bit of a bit more of a exponential curve, right? You might get more extra resources every turn, whereas in this game you just get 3 resources every turn, and that's all you get. So if you're going and building a deck, and like I get it, there are some decks that where you can just get comically large amounts of resources and do obscene things, but most decks, for normal people, if you're sitting there, throwing 4 or 5 cost cards into your deck, if you've got 10 cards that cost 4 or more, you're only getting 3 resources a turn. You're not going to be able to play those cards, and that's one of the really cool things. If you look at the graphs that I've got here, actually come straight out of RingsDB. So if you put your deck into RingsDB, you can be like, oh, that looks like a good deck, and then like, oh, my stuff is too expensive. I can't afford this. And there'll be a bit of tuning and things like that as you go along. What you'll find is that you'll play it and you'll be like, oh, I just ended up with too many cards in my hand, or like I'll talk a little bit about the deck that I iterated through, where I kind of learned a lot of this. I was running Aragorn, and I found that I was using his hero power a lot, which meant that I was effectively getting 2 resources a turn, not 3. So I actually had to like bring my resources down. I was, like I was running like 2 Erkenbrands, 2 Raymond's, which are like full cost cards, and you're like, huh, what? I can't do anything with this. Like it's not no good to me in my hand. Um, so yeah, usually on a deck, if you're playing on expert, and just a little bit of card draw, maybe, so you're not running like someone like Faramir, who can pretty consistently get you an extra card every turn. And there are ways of getting, a heap of cards even on standard and expert difficulty, advanced and expert. Sorry, I just forgot them already. Advanced and expert difficulty. Um, there are ways of getting a heap of cards. But, normally you want to probably keep your curve around 2. Like you probably don't want to have most of your cards sort of cost about 2, because it means you'll be able to play them. And that helps a lot. And similarly, if you're playing a deck on narrative lane, you probably want to be taking cards that are pretty cheap. You want to be taking a lot of cards that probably cost 1. That may not quite be as powerful, but you're sitting there and going, well, I'm drawing 2 cards a turn if you haven't got a lot of resource generation, so, and those are the sorts of things you need to kind of, keep in mind. That's, keep an eye on the resource cost of the cards in your deck. It's pretty, you'll find out pretty quickly when you start playing it if it doesn't work, and you can always just jump out and fix it. Start taking out some of those high cost cards. I think in a deck that I'll show you later, I think for a while there I was running Raymond and I couldn't afford it, so I swapped them out for sorry, what was I running? Sorry, Ranger Spear, which is like a 2 cost weapon attachment, and then I swapped them out for Warrior Sword because I could never afford them, because they're not as good, but they're free basically. So but yeah, we'll keep motoring along.
Yeah, as I go through all of them.
Yeah, it's that really annoying thing where you're like, oh, I'm the one doing the thing, but Sarah's the one moving the presentation. I always hate that.
Yeah. Slide.
So similarly with that, it's not necessarily a curve thing, but you want to have the right sort of distribution of card types in your deck as well. Like there's nothing worse than you're sitting there with a certain board state and you draw an ally that you can't play, or you draw you're sitting there going like you grab that top card and then you're like, that's not what I needed. Which it's a card game, and those things are always going to happen, but you can minimize the impact of that by making sure that you've got a good number of allies. So having probably there are always exceptions, but if you want to building a deck with you probably want 10 to 14 allies or 10 to 12 allies and 10 to 12 attachments in it. Because attachments are really great. Bit of a intro, I guess, if you're not aware, like each of your heroes can have 3 attachments. They can have a weapon, an armor, and a special attachment. And so whenever I build a deck, unless you're Bjorn, but Bjorn's also not a hero.
Right, that's true. That's
right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I should. I always start building my deck by going, what attachments am I going to put on these heroes? Because your heroes tend to hang around. If things are going well, your heroes will be there the entire game. So you get so much value out of any attachment you have on heroes. Especially if they have any readying abilities, whether it be, through attachments or if they have it natively. So anytime if you can give someone like a Drayan, so a Drayan's got an ability where when she kills something, she readies. So if you basically say, I'm going to give her, +1 attack, she's going to be killing stuff more frequently. And when she readies, she gets to do that 3 damage again. So anyone who's got any sort of readying ability is, you just get so much double duty out of heroes. But even just having heroes themselves, they get a lot of they get a lot of value out of any attachments. So if you have a look, the screenshot I've put there is actually those are the 12 attachments that I have in my deck, and there's some notable exceptions there, right? So Naya, which we'll cover off later, is like Gandalf's special ring. It's actually Gandalf's ring in the lore, and it also goes really well on him. And Forest Snare is an attachment that goes on Sauron's minions. But other than that, I've got 9 attachments, and there are 9 slots on my heroes. So
not an accident.
Not an accident, yeah. And like I'm not going to draw them all, right? But it basically means that I kind of know that if I draw, Ravenwing Helm, well, that goes on Adrayan. If I draw a Raymond, that goes on Aragorn. I know where they all go. And all things being equal, that's, as I draw them, that's where I put them. So yeah, planning out your attachments and making sure that, I think from a beginner's point of view, prioritizing attachments on your heroes is broadly speaking good advice. There are some amazing combos that you can pull off with certain attachments on allies, and there are, like I said, Naya's a special edge case where it actually has to go on an ally because it goes on an Astari character. So obviously there are some exceptions, but you'll get really good value out of any attachments that you put on a hero. So planning that out goes a long way. So motor along, Sarah. I think the interesting bit's actually coming up, and I like where are you?
A question came up on Twitch. Will we be able to export deck codes in a future release of the game? My answer to you is yes. This has come up a couple times actually, and there's previous streams that Greg sat in and talked about. I believe the one with Tim Cable, he actually did talk about it a little bit. Basically, what I can tell you is that it's on their radar. They're aware it's wanted. They're aware it's needed. It's just there are other things that take precedence right now. So yes is my answer in a future release. So anyway, next slide is choose your heroes wisely.
Yeah, so this is kind of what I was touching on right at the start, where I was like, the each of the colors that they have names that come from the tabletop, and they're basically copy pasted over, and the roles that those cards do, or tend towards, I should say, hold up. So if you're just entering into deck building land, if you haven't done any of this before and you weren't really aware, the way I usually like to do it, and the way that I found the best way was actually to try and mitigate what I wasn't taking, if that makes sense. So when you go into the game, go into the deck builder, you're going to take 3 heroes, right? So, and there are 4 spheres. So even if you take 3 heroes from different spheres, there's going to be something you're not taking. And my kind of, the way I always kind of play it or when I was first starting off was I'll take 3 heroes from different spheres, and then I'll mitigate that one that I didn't take, and that's kind of, I find that to be the most effective way. Now it's probably a good time to talk about what happens if you take more than one hero. Like if you roll in and you say, hey, look, I really want to build a deck with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, or you want to build a deck with all dwarves or something like that. If that's really what you want to play, that's fine. There's nothing kind of stopping you from doing that, but you do have to take into consideration that there's going to be certain things you're just not going to have, or you're going to have to mitigate not having. You need a glass of water, Sarah? You okay?
Spit is difficult sometimes. Keep going. I'm just going to die over here for a minute.
She's just going to die in the corner there?
Sorry. Keep going.
Do you think something She thinks I'm full of crap. That's what she thinks.
Not at
Anyway,
all.
yeah.
I
So
just choked on my own spit. It's a regular occurrence. Sorry, go on.
yeah. So I think we'll go through each of these kind of spheres and we'll talk about like what are kind of the epitome cards. But if you take two heroes of the same sphere, what they tend to do is they tend to be more of the same. They tend to do like, don't get me wrong, like the cards are super powerful, um, and they're good value. However, you just have to take into consideration that you're not going to take, you're not going to have other there's going to be other spheres you're not going to have. So if you sit there and go, I'm going to take two leadership and law, um, you're going to have to mitigate not having a massive amount of threat reduction. You're going to have to mitigate not having, huge amounts of willpower or readying. You're going to probably be a little bit weaker in the attachment space from not having tactics. Like, by all means, play that deck. Just be aware that you're going to be missing some of this stuff. So I guess and there are level 3 cards as well, right? So, and there's only a couple in each sphere. So look, if you're just getting started, I'd probably leave the playing 3 heroes of the same sphere on the shelf for a little while. It's not it's not for the faint-hearted, especially playing 3 tactics heroes. That's a good way of ending with a loss.
It's a lot
So
of
I think
fun to do 3 tactics, but yeah, you're missing a lot of really good factions of this game. You're not going to have your willpower, threat reduction, any of that. So it's fun. Probably won't last long though.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to do that, and I, when Sarah and I were talking about this, we kind of didn't want to complicate things by doing too much about multiplayer. So obviously, the game can be played co-op, and obviously that creates so many more opportunities for you to play weird and wonderful decks, because you're basically playing 6 heroes. And that lets you kind of specialize, and I actually, I have in my deck collection, I have 4 single sphere decks, and what I normally do is when I jump into like a pickup game, so if someone's just hosted a game and I jump in, I'll just let them pick whatever deck they want to play, and I'll play 3 heroes of the sphere that they don't take. So if they're playing, I'll play leadership. They've got leadership, tactics, and law, and I'll just play 3 spirit heroes. So it's like, and it's fun. Like it's fun to play those kind of decks. But when you're playing single player, it can be a little bit challenging. I personally find it's better to kind of play three heroes of a different sphere. Definitely when you're starting out. But I'd be really interested to hear, like we've got a few old hats in the chat, at least on Twitch. Like I'd be interested if you've got any kind of, if you've kind of come along and kind of said, well, no, I actually find that playing 2 tactics heroes is easier than playing only 1 tactics hero or something like that. Because I confess, when I played this game for a long time, and when the game first came out, there weren't a lot of level 2 cards, so there was even less of a reason to kind of play 2 heroes of the same sphere, but it's probably more so now. Like definitely, if you have a look at some of the level 2 leadership cards or level 2 spirit cards, like some of those are really good.
Cram is one of my favorite level 2s. One of my favorites. Because you get healing and then it readies. Plus, the art's really great. But I guess hinging on that from, as he's mentioned, my first stream was just bonkers bad. But so you've seen me kind of evolve as a player. That's the fun part, is I got to live my evolution on live. But I very rarely dabble into the multisphere, and I feel like right now I don't know that sacrificing a certain aspect of your gameplay is worth the one or two cards you might be able to play. That's my opinion on the matter, anyway.
Yeah, and look, I think there's a member of our Discord community named King's Knight Twitch, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but he's doing a guide at the moment, and he's actually suggesting people to run like two heroes of one sphere. So like there are different ways to skin this cat, so to speak. But certainly my experience has been as a if I'm a newbie, I want to try and cover as many of those kind of core functions as I can without having to double up and mitigate something extra, like you know try and play a deck without lore and spirit. Like it's tough. Like
When you're brand new, yeah, they're almost staples when you're trying to figure out
yeah.
how the game works.
Yeah, so we'll get going and we'll start talking about some of like what I've done is I've grabbed some of the cards that I think are kind of the corner, like call them the cornerstone, call them like the epitome of these sort of cards, and so it kind of helps you kind of be really clear about what that sphere does. So when you're picking leadership, what are you getting? And I think I didn't read the PowerPoint explicitly, sort of thing, but if you leadership has got a lot of it's got most of the guard characters in the game. There's only a handful, a very small handful, in fact, that don't have guard. So Gardener's ability that when you play him and at the start of every turn, that means that Sauron has to attack them first, and it's a really powerful ability to keep your heroes alive. Erkenbrand was like when the game first came out. Erkenbrand was like my favorite card for like the longest time. So Erkenbrand, I feel like he's like the most leadership ally because he's got block, he's got guard. My favorite kind of thing was to whack like a self-preservation on him and then just be like, all right, I'm done now. Like, you just can't touch this. So he's a really useful ally. He has a tendency to hang around for a long time. He'll take more than a few hits. If you can heal him, he'll hang around for quite a while. Gaining strength is a really great card as well. If you're playing narrative, especially, or if you're playing standard difficulty, because you've got the extra cards, and there are other cards in leadership as well where you can get extra resources. And there are, this was just one example, but there are cards in leadership that let you get more resources, and if you play those cards, it means that you can offset that thing in narrative where you're drawing two cards and you can't afford to play any of them. So, leadership is a really good sphere to start off with, I think, because of that, because you get that extra resource. They have some really cool attachments as well. So, Ravenwing Helm is like is a card that gives you block, which means you take less damage. You get additional attack and attacking. It's a great attachment, and it's one of your armor slots, right? So they have some really good armor things. And I threw in like a level 2 or 3 card in each of these kind of slide decks, these slides, and kind of go like, this is like, if you go this far, this is what you can expect to get out of this sphere. And Strength of Arms, right, is like, it's a 1-cost event that is like ready each of your exhausted characters, right? And you have to play 3 leadership heroes to be able to play them, and it is nuts. If you're playing in co-op, it doesn't work on your allies, I don't believe. I think I tried that once. So it doesn't work on your co-op partner, which is a bit disappointing because it's ready each of you all. But someone can correct me if I'm wrong there. But I'm pretty sure that one doesn't. Yeah. That one doesn't work. But there are plenty of other ones which like work across the board. But so that can be a really cool card to play. And leadership's got a little bit of readying and things like that. So next is tactics. Actually, I wanted to ask, like, does anyone disagree? Like, if you old hat in the game, do you think is there a card that you think I missed out? I was going to put Sword of Numenor in there as well, which is kind of like gains an attack and a resource when you kill something. But I tried to kind of capture the kind of essence of each sphere so that you kind of knew what you were getting into.
For me, you grabbed the ones that if I'm playing tactics, I always grab. Quick Strike is one that I don't always, but like Warrior Sword, Raiment of War are some of my two most favorite attachments in the game. There's definitely more powerful attachments than Warrior Sword, but it's really hard to beat a 0 cost +1 attack. Like, it's really hard to pass that up.
Yeah, like and that's what I said. Like, that you'll fall into the trap almost assuredly. I think everybody has, where you just kind of don't get your resource split right. And then you'll find yourself, like I said, you drop a Raymond out to put Warrior Swords in, and then you're like, oh, this just runs a little bit better now. And it's a balancing act, guys. Like, you'll go back in and adjust your deck all the time, and that's the best part, like going in and doing the tweaking. In my opinion, anyway. Like, you'll be sitting there going, oh, I didn't have any cards. I'll adjust my deck somehow. Quick Strike is the level 2 card, Sarah, which is probably why you don't usually play it. Yeah, but I find it really interesting because it's kind of like a poor man's Starbridge in your. I got to talk your language there, Sarah, but you've got to.
Starbridge is my jam. I can't. I will not make apologies for that.
No.
And it's your fault, actually. You're the one who told me to get it.
I was like, you should probably put that in there. Yeah. So like Quick Strike is an interesting card because it allows you to you can take a hero that's exhausted, like a Gimli that might be like a 5 or 6 attack or something, and you'd be like, so Sauron will play a minion, and you're like, oh, I've got no way to deal with that, and you'll be like, yes, I do, blat. So there's lots of little kind of tricks there where it's like a one-off kind of get out of jail free on killing a big bad minion that's about to crash into you. It also bypasses things like guard, because it doesn't target it. So if you have to get around that can be a really handy way. Tactics also has a lot of ranged, which is something I never really thought about until I sat down with this. And it's one of those things you don't think too much about, but then when you don't have any, like when you're sitting there and going like, I really want to get rid of that flying, bat, or I want to, if you ever had that, like a hammer horn or something, spawn another hammer horn, you're like, oh man, I wish I had more ranged. But the Fornos Bowman's great kind of like it's the epitome of tactics card, because he gets like, you play him really early and he gets bigger, and you can start putting some attachments on him, right? So you sit there and go, well, oh gee, what if I put a Warrior Sword on my Fornos Bowman? All of a sudden he can be like 5 attack and he can start one-shotting things, and that's because he's got ranged, he can snipe around guard and things like that. So he's like, kind of a really cool ally, I think. But yeah, tactics, it's all about killing bad guys. You'll get, a lot of the heroes have got really high attack, and the cards kind of help you kill bad guys faster and more efficiently.
The other thing I was going to mention about the Fornos Bowman is he's a Dunedain, Dunedain, which has some really great synergy actually in leadership. There's a lot of like readying and what's the attachment, cloak, right? Where if it's on a Dunedain, character can do an extra. So I think there's good synergy between those two, which I digress. Moving on.
No,
Lore.
not at all. Well, it's a good point, really, because that's the thing I love the most about this is you kind of sit there and someone posts a deck and I'm like, I would never have built that deck. Well, I would never have built that. Like, and it doesn't mean it's a bad deck. Quite the opposite, But I think it's really I find it really interesting to see people go through that kind of deck building journey and just come out with some really weird and wonderful stuff. like I'm sure Engage went through and played like nothing but hobbits for a while there because he's a madman. Madman.
I do believe I saw him making an yep. Engage should be here. So
Oh, you is that, eh? Oh, it's making.
Radjets is asking a question about deck building. Currently, is it possible to delete the starter deck on deck selection? Right now, the answer is no. That is something that was recently changed and implemented. And eventually, I believe that is the plan to be able to configure it a little more. But right now, you're stuck with them. Sorry.
Yeah, I think on the stream on Tuesday, Greg mentioned about being able to filter them, like toggle them on and off and things like that. So hopefully I don't speak out of line there, but I believe that's what he said.
You are correct. Yeah, it's coming. It's just for right now. It's scroll past them.
Yeah. So everyone's favorite lore. It's hard to go past healing, and it's a good place. It's a good sphere to have when you're just getting going. Because one of the I think I don't know about you, Sarah, but like certainly from watching people play when they first pick this up, guarding is like one of the things that is, it's one of those key skills that you don't get straight away. And if you don't have healing, it can be really punishing if you don't know how to guard.
It's true. I again referencing my first stream. I think I maybe guarded once, and it was on accident. Like, so lore is actually really good if you plan on guarding quite a bit. Lore is always it stole my heart immediately, so it's always been my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll notice, like, I'm not even talking about the heroes here. Like, I kind of, we could be here forever. You start talking about that, but you don't really want to go down that path. But yeah, like lore is all about card draw and healing. And they have a little bit of control. So yeah, looking at someone like the record keeper, he's got the record keeper's got some an interesting upkeep ability, which means that if you're playing on one of the harder difficulties and you're struggling to get card draw, a card like him, and I wasn't going to talk about heroes, but like Faramir has an ability where he can draw cards for you. Probably don't need those guys on narrative, but if you're playing on the other difficulties, you might want them. In Ladris Minstrel, we'll do the allies. I stand by. I struggle to think of a better ally in this game, to be honest. Like she's just so good, and she's not as good as she used to be, because there wasn't the limit initially, and it was just
endless healing.
Like it was, yeah. Like it's basically, you got to decide whether or not, you won based on whether or not you could get your minstrel in your opening hand, basically.
Yeah, that's pretty much
thankfully
it.
They toned that down a little bit, but she's still super good, but she's super fragile. Like it's Sauron having a 3 attack minion is not an uncommon thing. So come out and whack you. Forest Snare is a really good card as well. So it's an attachment that goes on Sauron, and you basically just nope one of his minions. So if you ever have you play like one of those spider quests, and you're just like, oh man, that 3/7 spider with block, and you're just like, nope.
I approve of the use of the word nope as a verb, by the way. Just nope them.
You just nope them. Yeah, so and like each of the spheres have got a little bit of the other stuff as well, right? So you've got like Spirit's got a lot of that kind of hard removal. So but Lore has a little bit of it as well. I chucked in Heed the Dream, so I think it's a really interesting card. It's actually a really, really new one, but it probably doesn't kind of fit the lore thing. But it's it's an event that lets you draw more cards at the cost of threat. So it's an interesting kind of mechanic where you can kind of throw caution to the wind and draw some cards, because sometimes you can't afford Gandalf. Like it's just five's a lot of resources for
That's true.
Gandalf, and sometimes you're like, well, I'll just take my 3 cards, thanks, and move on. um, yeah, Rajats. It's funny you should mention that. What you should do is, so Rajat was just asking about building a dwarf deck. Um, I I've actually kind of played around with that, and the trap there is a trap of just playing dwarf heroes. You can actually play some really powerful dwarf decks without playing all the dwarf heroes. You can actually get a good spread of heroes and you play like Dane because he's amazing. But if you play like the other spheres, you can actually get some really cool, you know, allies from like the Spirit and the Law sphere for dwarf. And they all get buffed by Dane and things like that. So yeah, there are some interesting dwarf decks that you can play that isn't just taking Dane, Dis, and Gimli. But you know, I go and have a play around, man. Like just jump into the deck builder and just search for dwarf on the ally tab and see what you can put together, because I think you'll probably surprise yourself. So on that, let's motor along to Spirit. So I almost didn't put Starbreach in, you know. I was super tempted to leave
and then
it out,
you would have suffered my wrath.
just to troll. Just to troll.
And then I would have been like,
yeah.
yeah, okay, he's trolling me, it's fine.
He's just trolling, you know. So Spirit, oh man, like it's really hard to go past Spirit. It's got lots of threat reduction. So, you know, threat's one of those things. It's a really unique mechanic to this game. And, you know, so threat and fate are those kind of two things in this game that, you know, like it really kind of sets it apart. And it's one of those things that if you don't pay attention to it, like if you just ignore it, it will surprise you, and not in a good way. It will kind of take you, you'll travel to a new location and you'll hit that threat event, and then all of a sudden bad things will come in. And yeah, like Spirit is, you know, there are other ways outside of Spirit to reduce your threat, but mostly if you're not running Spirit, you kind of just have to take it. And there's not much you can do about it. Like,
that's true.
But the other thing that Spirit gets is they get a lot of readying. They get a lot. They get most of the readying. And Starbreach is you know, it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat that stalwart. Being able to get 2 actions out of a hero is super good, because and then if you combine that with other attachments, all of a sudden you're able to get like I think I've gotten like a 7 or 8 power willpower Elrond before. Just
Yep.
you know, you get him like activating twice and you're just like objectives.
Worth mentioning with Starbroach, I feel, is the moment you attach it to something, it becomes Sauron's target, though. So
greedy hands, greedy fingers.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I forget what's the name of Sauron's card where he can remove an attachment.
It's greedy fingers.
Okay, yeah, greedy fingers. Yeah. It's remove an attachment at random. Random my foot. That's all I have to say about that. It's almost always Starbroach. Almost always.
It's either that or Raymond. Like, there's nothing worse than, like, I just saved up 2 turns to play Raymond, and then off it goes.
Yep, pretty much. Well, and not just that too, but it becomes like the enemy number 1 in terms of attack. Like, not across the board, but generally speaking, once you attach Starbroach, yeah, you got to look for ways to heal it, because that hero's gonna be taking some damage. Real quick, the Alpha Guinness. Sorry, I'm really bad at pronunciations. Will there be 3 or more heroes of each race of Middle Earth? More heroes are in the works. Down the road, though. Right now, they're just still wading through adventure mode and everything. So eventually is my answer.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so and the other thing that Spirit really gets a lot of is willpower. I think you can just get so much willpower. So if you're building a deck or you're doing a quest that needs to have a lot of willpower and manage your threat really well, Spirit is your go-to team. And I think the best I think it's the Maze Quest, which is like campaign 2, quest 3, I think,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. Like, I remember doing that and being like, I was actually did that. I don't think I've been able to do that on the hardest difficulty with the deck, but I'm kind of basing all of this off because it's got no spirit. I just like I find it really I'd find that quest really hard to do if you weren't running any threat reduction. And
Even
so there
when
are
you
some
are
quests
running
that
Spirit, it's really hard. I think, what did I have? Like
yeah,
2 or 3 streams where I tried to do it.
it's a tough quest, and it's some of those things where you're like, yeah, it's you can't, well, you can, like, but there are, some quests are certainly a lot harder than others if you choose to not take any threat reduction. And spirit, threat reduction and spirit, and willpower is that's where it's all at, for them. The other thing I didn't mention, this is probably a miss of me. Spirit has a lot of control-y stuff, and that's kind of represented in this game by a card type called Preparation, which is a special type of event, which is kind of like a response to Sauron's thing, kind of like, cancel your event, or get rid of that attachment, or Spirit has a lot of that sort of stuff, where you can just kind of play those things out, and the next time Sauron tries to do something, it'll stop him, or something else will happen. So, but that's cool. So I think that we'll move on to the next one. And Sarah actually prompted me to put this in here because I almost didn't. I was almost like, oh, neutral's not a sphere. It's not a sphere, right? Like, but it's worth pointing out. So neutrals, you can put any neutral cards in any deck. So all the other spheres, you actually have to have those heroes, or for level 2 cards, you have to have 2 of those, that sphere, to be able to play those cards. Neutral can be played by anybody, and it's got the ever ubiquitous Gandalf, and Gandalf is amazing. And one of the reasons why Gandalf's great is he gives you threat reduction outside of spirit. So if you're not playing spirit, he can let you reduce your threat, and a well-timed Gandalf can make a really big difference, because it's not just about lowering your threat by 3, it's about avoiding some of those really nasty threat events that might have otherwise triggered, and ruin your day. And then of course there's his ring, which is Naya, which means that he stays around. So normally Gandalf has fleeting, so he comes into play, he hangs around for a turn, and he leaves. Naya means that he stays there. So he's a special it's a special attachment. It's basically like a 2-card combo, if you will. And the reason why it's especially strong is that you notice, like I talked a bit earlier on about, like, if you're not playing certain spheres, you're going to find certain components of the game or certain aspects of the game a little bit harder, and you have to work around that. Gandalf is an answer to that, in that he's got 4 attack, which is massive. He's got 4 willpower, which is also massive. If he's got Naya on him, you can't have Starbroach, sadly, which is, I'm sure Sarah was trying to push that one through to the devs as a fix, But
I was trying to call in the favor, and they told me no.
yeah, I'm like, what do you mean? I can't have a ring and a necklace? Like, that's
You can wear
ridiculous, right?
both, right?
Yeah, I can have both. But no, so he's the special attachment slot is it's one of those kind of contested slots. But Gandalf, if you're playing a deck without tactics, so if you're playing, no, haven't got a lot of attack power, Gandalf can really help you in that space, because all of a sudden you've got a character that can swing in for 4 damage, that you wouldn't normally have had. You know, in similarly, you can say the same thing about willpower, right? If you're not playing spirit, you know, Gandalf can really help you, you know, get a fairly reasonable chunk of willpower onto the board and help you clear those objectives. And other than that, the neutral sphere, I think, will continue to be that kind of, you know, utilitarian kind of space. That's just kind of generally useful cards. Like Against the Shadow, you know, is a really great card to play as you just travel to a new location. You know, like, oh, Sauron, you've got like 8 minions on the board. I'm going to give all my characters protect so they don't take damage from those first attacks. You know, and Tom Bombadil gives you like some hard removal where you just kind of come in and goes, no. Well, what is it? Just nope. And
Yeah.
yeah, he
Nope,
goes
I'm out
away.
of there.
Just, nope. So yeah, you know, I kind of like that's kind of the review of all the spheres and things like that. And I know, like, I get that was probably a bit long, but you know, I kind of hope that what you got out of that, particularly if you're new to the game, is that you know, the choices that you make in your spheres, they really do matter. I quite deliberately didn't go through and talk about heroes. The reason being is I'm like, I kind of just want you to play the heroes that you want to play. Like, just, you know, like if you really want to play, you know, like, you know, Arwen really drew Sarah in. But, you know, like some people, you know, might just want to pick it up and say, oh, like I really wanted to play a Ranger deck. Like, so one of the first decks that I built once the first campaign or the first set of hero packs was released was I built a deck of Aragorn, Faramir, and Adrayan, and that's this deck here. And I basically went through and iterated over it, and it's been adjusted since then because I've got some newer cards in there. But you know, I'm not saying that this is not the most powerful deck. There are heaps of decks that are probably better than this. But I really enjoy playing this deck. Like, and like I just, you know, like I'll jump on and I'll just, you know, I'll fire up this deck and I'll go and just play something random, you know, and that to me is more important than, you know, playing a super powerful meta deck or whatever. Um, so you know, like this, and I guess the thing about this deck, what I really wanted to call out is I'm not playing Spirit. But you'll notice that I'm mitigating some of those things that I don't have. So one of the things that Spirit does a lot of is they have a lot of threat reduction and they have a lot of readying. I don't have a lot of either of those things, but I mitigated that by taking a Drain. So a Drain has some native readying when she kills something, and Aragorn has a resource, a power that lets him ready as a resource. And you know, mitigating some of the willpower concerns as well with Spirit. You know, being able to put, you know, a sword that was broken, which is Aragorn's sword, and Ranger Cloak, or just one of them onto Aragorn, getting him up to 3 willpower. And because he can ready and go twice, you know, all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can actually start clearing objectives, you know, and that works, you know, that works really well. And there's you know, I've got Gandalf in there, of course, to do a bit of threat reduction. But then things like Grace of the Eldar, which is Arwen's Hero Award, which if you just get that kind of by playing some games with her. But it does some healing and also reduces your threat by 1. You know, so being able to go out and grab those kind of cards that mitigate the things that you can't do. Certainly makes your deck a lot more well-rounded, and you get a lot less surprises. So yeah, I guess in the last deck, I grabbed this one off Rings DV, and I don't know if Unkar's Thug is around, but it's actually his deck, which is, and it was kind of cool because this is. I remember thinking the same thing where like you can also just build a deck around a card that you think is cool. And I think this is like one of those sort of like cards where you're like, man, I really want to make this work. You know, you might, you know, and Enduring Valor is amazing. I think when I built my version of this deck, I did it with Aragorn because I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, like I can do something with Aragorn and then he'll get guard and then Sauron will attack him and then I'll ready him. and then I'll do something with Aragorn, and then he'll get guard again, and you're just like, oh my god, this is nuts. But Enduring Valor is just one of those cards where it's like, let's just keep um, Gimli alive, you know. Like, so
Yeah.
basically playing two law heroes with Enduring Valor of Gimli, and then just being like, right, let's just prop Gimli up, you know. And yeah, again, there's going to be some quests where this deck will struggle, but I tell you what, I'm looking at it going, that'd be fun to play. Like, you know, it's a
I would
fun
agree
deck
with
to
that.
play.
It looks. I kind of want to go try it afterwards because it's a new. Enduring Valor always adds that little layer of like, oh, this will add some inherent difficulty into how you're playing. You just got to be smarter about it, I guess.
But yeah,
Current,
those extra actions, it matters. Like, it
yeah,
helps.
right. Kernier's asking about Knight of the White Tower versus Enduring Valor. I'm not as familiar
As
with
in
Knight of
better
the White
with.
Tower.
Yeah, so Knight of the White Tower I put in there because he's like a 3 attack ally, and he's cheap, right? So I was having issues with my resources. But Knight of the White Tower definitely goes really well with Enduring Valor because you can use his willpower. Actually, you know what, Corinne, I actually didn't think about this until I picked up Enduring Valor in Mirror of Galadriel. Like last night, actually, I was playing this, and I picked up like a Mirror of Galadriel's like as a game mode where you just get some random cards from the Fate meter, and I picked up Enduring Valor. I'm like, oh, I'm going to whack that on Knight of the White Tower, and you were right, Corinne. It's amazing. Like, it's nuts. And I'm just like, man, I would never have thought to put that in my deck. And it was just like, oh, I just happened to come across this. So, there's just so many interesting interactions, and um, like going on to the final slide, which is really just just an encouragement to you guys out there, which is like, go and build decks that you enjoy playing. Like, don't feel like you have to play every quest on expert to be validated, or whatever. Like, go and play. If you want to go and play some weird wonderful decks, or you want to see interesting interactions, like, just go build some decks and play them on narrative, and run through the third campaign. Like, you don't have to start at the start. Like, I think Greg's mentioned a heap of times on the stream that he's really proud of the third campaign and all the beautiful artwork and stuff that went into that. Like, there's
It's
no
noticeably
shame.
prettier.
It is noticeably prettier. But yeah, there's nothing stopping you just going and jumping in and playing something random. Or if you're really really intimidated by the deck building things, the standard deck is fine. Like, it does work, and you can copy it and make changes to it. So there are a bunch of decks that you get just from completing the tutorial. Or again, I said this earlier, but come over to Discord, come over to RingsDB. There's no shortage of people who would love to give you a hand if you're struggling with that sort of thing. So yeah, come and join us. It is one of those sort of really great communities. And I was talking to Sarah earlier on this week about, we kind of, it's great how we're a bit of a self-moderating community in that regard. Like, I don't think Sarah's had to pull out the discipline stick yet, which is, it's nice. It's
I've
a
banned
good
no
community
one.
to be a part of. Yeah, it's and Greg and the other devs are really active over there, and they have been, even before the obviously they're going through a bunch of bug squashing at the moment with adventure mode, but like, they were interacting with us over there since before the last patch. So it's great to have them over there. I'm not being
Not
paid to
just
be
me
here, by the way.
plugging away at the Discord. I know there's hesitation. We've gotten a few people like, oh, I don't do Discord. Understand. And it's another media that maybe you do or do not want. But really, it is going to be the optimal resource. It's where all the cool kids hang out that play this game. Can I say that? I just did. Um, But yes, not just me plugging it. We've got another person saying the same thing. So, but that is a little bit over the top of the hour. So I don't want to keep everybody forever. But keep in mind that these are this was just one person's perspective. There are no right or wrong ways, but I think this is a really solid base of understanding, because the deck building part can be a little intimidating. There's a lot to pay attention to. There's a lot to notice. So I think this is a really great way to sort of compartmentalize certain aspects of the deck building process. So thank you so much, Widowmaker, Ian, for joining us. It is late over in Australia, so that's another reason I got to put a kibosh on this stream, because he's got to go to bed. But yes, thank you so much for joining. You are instrumental in a lot of the stuff that's on Discord as well. So he's on there. Hit him up if you have more questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'll get my little end screen up. And again, Tabletop event is on Steam, so go check that out. You can pick up Lord of the Rings for a discounted price. I want to say it's 40% off, something like that. My brother just picked it up yesterday, so get on it. Thanks, everybody.